see, Chinese are not integrationists. They are actually very exclusive. They set up their own towns, have their own restaurants, have their own supermarkets with Chinese characters, have their own massage parlors. They don't want to have anything to do with the locals except to take their money.
What happens in a country which is run by engineers as opposed to those which are run by lawyers? But the ones that are run by lawyers, in 10 years, you'll have 1,000 pieces of legislation to make things impossible. The one run by engineers, you have, after 10 years, 1,000 bridges and railways and whatever.
1,000 things that make life possible.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Bad Natives. I am Robert Kavshenga, the one that lives in Kampala, Uganda. And this week, I want to shout out to the East African Perspective podcast. You guys have really engaged with our content. You're even about to own it for yourselves. You're beating us to it. So thank you very much for the time you spend with us, listening, watching, and taking in what we have to say. Thank you for having our backs. Talking about having our backs, first to the man across the border from me.
I'm Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi.
And please like, subscribe, follow, log on, listen at length, and enjoy our perspectives. Because this week, we're going to a corner of Africa that sometimes we rarely hear from them. We used to hear from them so much in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, even in the 2000s. And then suddenly things go quiet. But now they've exploded. Angola. Charles, first of all, just explain to people, where is Angola? Let's start. Where is that country to be found?
Angola is in southern Africa, or along the Atlantic. It's a huge country. This, at one point when Angola had this very long war against the UNITA rebels led by Jonas Savimbi. At that point, that country nearly had an army of 1 million.
Yes. Up to today, I think it's still the largest military force on the continent and the most effective.
No, Bob.
Oh, really?
Yes, and that is the story of,
goodness.
when the South African Development Community put together an intervention in Mozambique. I think Angola sent 6 people.
What?
Because it happens to all these governments when either military rule ends, like in Nigeria, or when the war against rebels ends, they demobilize, they dismantle, the military, and they have done something of a similar scale to their economy, because this is one of Africa's largest producers. And it has fuel queues which are 2 kilometers long.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's you produce so much fuel, and I think they refine less than 30% of the capacity that they need. So the protests erupted because they then did what Nigeria did. They removed the fuel. So the fuel was both not available, but was also very expensive. So in the protests, they then did, they attacked properties and shops and all that, but they targeted nearly 150 Chinese businesses. So, So it led to, I think, nearly 5,000 Chinese had to leave the
Mm-hmm.
country. And it has, depending on the statistics you look at, that country has 300,000 Chinese. So Bob, I think these are some of the things that you tend to give attention to. But do you think what do we read into that? Do you think that for you to be such an important, and because Angola has been one of the most important partners for China, but for you to have a situation where protests target your businesses, do you think China has dropped the ball somewhere there?
Yes, and we'll come back to it, and I'll tell you where China has. I think China dropped the ball in Angola. It's strange. China. Let me make a comparison, Charles. So the one country where China has had a consistently successful foreign policy engagement in Africa is Tanzania.
Yeah,
They got it absolutely and utterly correct. And that credit goes to Zhou Enlai because he shaped that relationship on the basis of what the Chinese call country to country, fraternal brotherhood. Now, you go back into the history of China's dealings in Angola. China was actually originally on the side of UNITA because Jonas Savimbi was trained in China. Then, at some point, because of the leftist issues that were going on in the Cold War, Jonas Savimbi shifted, and Ronald Reagan and all of that shifted his allegiances to the US. So China lost out. Then China round two comes during the MPLA after the end of the Civil War, but China now comes as a businessman rather than a political partner.
yeah,
So the China that then arrives in Angola is the same China that arrives in Zambia. And they had only one focus: to make the most out of the resources of Angola, extract. So that's why they were very keen on the oil. So they go in together with Chevron and all of these guys and they try to take the oil. So China was very, very deep in the extractives industry and therefore also tended to be rapacious. So I guess what I'm trying to say in the long answer to your question, Charles, is that for a country that has always led or that always led with its political agenda, the China that comes into Southern Africa in the late 2000s and, early 2010s or the teens is a China that is even more capitalistic in its behavior than the imperialists as we have known them. And China brings another element to it. You see, Chinese are not integrationists. They are actually
yeah.
very exclusive.
Eh?
They set up their own towns, have their own restaurants, have their own supermarkets with Chinese characters, have their own massage parlors. They don't want to have anything to do with the locals except to take their money. Now, China's trade also has taken a very, very interesting turn. So China, instead of allowing the Africans to be middlemen in their countries as traders importing goods from China, the Chinese are then coming into the countries where they're present to play the role of trader. And I find that that's a problem because what it has done is it has undermined the trader community who don't have the same credit and financing capacity to get goods from China and bring them into the countries. So the Chinese now come, they get investment licenses, they have legal advice from their country on how to navigate the resident countries, they have cheap financing, they have cheap credit. So they've displaced the mercantile class in Africa. And that situation is not any different from Angola. So you have the cost, by the way, I don't know if you remember that statistic, because you're the one who pointed it out. I can't remember what discussion we're having. And you said Luanda is one of the most expensive cities to live in on the African continent.
Yeah.
A hotel room in Luanda was going for $350 a night. And that's not even the top end. That's like mid-level hotel.
And they have that Chinese problem of cities, empty cities.
Exactly, because the locals can't afford them. The
Yeah,
foreigners don't want to
exactly.
live there.
Yeah.
So I think that combination of factors has done two things. It has created a bitterness within the local population who need a foreign bogeyman. The way South Africans always go into their phases of xenophobia against other Africans, the Angolans are seeing their impoverishment and they see the Chinese prospering in their country and they're thinking, you guys are the ones responsible for it. So, and I think China has not been strategic or has not focused properly on how to manage the way they manage the Tanzania relationship. They've not managed the other relationships with the Communist Party approach of strategic engagement. They've allowed private business people to just come set up. They get contracts, they do work, they extract money, they go. Yeah.
Which is surprising, because a country like that, you would think by now they would have strategically, they would think of these relations of in a smart way. And one of the things we see, first of all, they have this problem of everything that they do in Africa and I guess elsewhere, it is with the state and state institutions.
Yes.
And in Africa, we have a very difficult relationship with our states.
Yes.
So if that is the platform of your engagement, you are going to run into problems, around managing your soft power politics. But where and really the main platform of their soft power politics are the Confucius institutes.
Yeah.
But I mean, you see the Confucius Institute at Nairobi University, Makerere University or something. So they go to the state universities, and the Confucius Institutes are stiff, those kind of things. So they don't do the scholarship for the peasant son.
But you see, Charles,
The movies, they don't,
no, but
they don't go to
they don't
Kabera
have Bollywood.
Maido. Yes.
and
And
they don't have
yeah,
a league, a football league where Africans will go and shine and have sympathy and everyone's going to. But you see, Charles, the colonial stroke imperial powers, first of all, had 50, 60 years of understanding the societies in which they had come, because they started as slave traders, Angola being one of the greatest suppliers. But then they also quickly realized. So, and let me make a bold statement here, Charles. One of the casualties of the dismantling of USAID could be China. So
explain that.
China was happy to be the businessman pushing trade as long as the United States was picking the bill for the social services. Yes. Now the United States is not there to pick the bill for social services, for infrastructure financing in terms of through the World Bank and so on. China must now step up to that role if it is to play the new client for these African states. That might be more than they're able to do, Charles. And if their investors are only interested in coming to set up shops, sell things, and go away, they don't care about the things, by the way, that imperialists worry about is the society. Is it creating jobs? Are they protecting their people against bad practices? Because we need that context in which to do trade. The Chinese don't care. Now, the problem with that is someone else has been taking care of it. If that's not taken care of, you become the victim. So that's what I'm saying. I'm making a bold statement that we may not, we haven't looked at Elon Musk's
Oh,
Doge madness properly, but it might have a complete reshaping of the African continent in ways unanticipated. But back to Angola, Charles, there is also, I see, a second geopolitical issue. What's the geopolitical issue that I see? The United States seems to have decided to deal with countries in Africa that are along the Atlantic coastline, especially those that have significant resources and are not as pesky and as difficult as South Africa. Because South Africa has all sorts of issues, law and order. They have these activists. It's too many power centers. You can't do deals. The Trump way.
courts they have make rulings which
Yeah.
the government can't ignore the way Trump ignores American law court rulings.
No, and you do so. They go to the streets. They have a Julius Malema. They have they have all this Zuma. So you can't. So my reading of this, Charles, is that the Americans are only too happy to see the Chinese in Angola take the heat or the fall because then they can come in. Why do they need to come in? So first of all, whether it's Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, DR Congo, Congo Brazzaville, Nigeria, these countries have endless sources of oil. So if America develops partnerships there, already they are investing, I think it's what, 385 billion or is it $385 million in a railway line, taking extractives from Congo through the Angolan port of Lobito. Now, what that is telling you is that the Americans want to have access to Africa through a route that goes straight with no interruptions from the Middle East and all your problems of Israel and Arabs and the Red Sea. And no, that's too much work. So deal with these countries, take a lead role. The other guys in the rest of the continent can go to hell. So suddenly Angola has become a center of keen American interest. And it's one that they want to prize away from the Chinese. That's why I said that the Chinese have also dropped the ball, because ever since Eduardo dos Santos left, I've not seen an active Chinese engagement. But also I think it came at a time when China was reassessing its involvement on the African continent. They burnt their fingers in Zambia. Their only whatever ally now there is Zimbabwe, and you know the problems of Zimbabwe. So it's an interesting case. Yeah.
The which is and because the moment if you look at the trade data, Bob, by last month, China's export to Africa were more equal to what they did the whole of last year, which is one of the results coming from the Trump tariffs. So the trade has grown. It's huge. It's massive, and there is that duty-free status they have granted to African economies. But you're right. If you look, their infrastructure spending and all those things are
That money
totally
has dried up.
yeah. That money has dried up. And like you're saying, the Italians, when the Italians, were building roads in East Africa, in in the early 20th century, like in places like Uganda, most of those contractors were Italians. Wherever they passed, they left little brown kids.
I know a few. I know a few personal ones.
So you probably are right that they are a little too insular, and then the other thing is that the Chinese come and bribe. They'll bribe business. I mean, politicians and all that for licenses and contracts, but they don't give them shares.
No,
You see, the Western
no.
companies, even big
They
ones
give
like
you a stake.
Coca-Cola, when they came, they gave the big people
You give the
5%.
Jeremiah Kireni must be your man in every sense. But you see, the Chinese cynicism is that they'll give you a few shiny toys. They'll give you cars to mess you around, take you to Guangzhou in a 7-star hotel, and then after that they give you a couple $100,000 and you give them a license. But Charles, let me broaden this a little bit. Because earlier on in the break when we were talking, I was saying the problem with US withdrawing from the world, China thinks, oh, okay, we're going to become the new world power, or we're positioning as the new world power in the realignment. But then I ask one question. The world financial system, for instance, has been constructed around the financial system of the West and the American guarantors and the American system. Does China have the capacity to be the financial arbiter of the world economy? Is it even a burden? First of all, is their politics constructed in a way? So, for instance, when you look at the US, the West's banking system is free, and free in the sense that it is privately owned and can intermediate all sorts of transactions. Is that a burden that the Chinese establishment, which is so hell-bent on control of every step of transactions, for WeChat to this, doesn't taking over the world necessarily mean they have to make certain concessions, which may include making certain concessions inside China in
Yes,
terms
of
of
the
the way
politics. Yeah,
of the politics?
I think
Yeah.
I think that the moment favors them. But what we are beginning to see is that the way they are approaching it is
Mm,
they don't want to do it alone. eh? They want to do it
yes.
in this kind of BRICS context. So
Mm,
what will happen? What people are seeing is that they will move to a world where everyone, or at least at one point, is it 8 or something percent of the world keep their foreign reserve in US dollars. The US dollar will soon be a shit currency anyway.
man, it's
It's
dropping like a stone.
yeah. So we will be in a situation where probably the US has 30%,
Mm,
the EU, because the EU, the EU is very stable, and it's clear that it's got a more adhesion to the rule of law than America or China. Well, China is not even rule of law; it's politics. So you're actually
mm,
right that until you have a financial system where you have uh, kind of an autonomy away from the politics, in
mm,
which I can be sure that, look, if I have a problem in this market, my issue will be resolved by the court and
yes.
not by the whims of the president or a minister. I don't actually think that you'll ever really have the currency and be the economy on which the rest of the world relies. So you are right. In that sense that we will we will they will we are going to have huge trade in in the Chinese yuan, no doubt about that. And for many people, for many countries and companies, soon it will make sense. But for it to then be to provide the world's new reserve currency, probably not. Not when it is structured as it is now. No.
So this is where then, Charles, I want to flip our conversation on its head. Do you think that African leaders and the African political establishment is prepared or can even foresee the changes as we're discussing them that are happening to the China position? Because many of them in the last 20 years have sort of been playing China off against the West.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when in the countries or where they run affairs, you start to get like Angola, you start to get a backlash from the local population against the Chinese. And that, by the way, is not just Angola. In Uganda, every time the traders have gone on strike, the issue number one, or rather number two, because number one is taxes. But issue number two is that the government has allowed the Chinese to come as traders and undercut the local import traders who are bringing money, who are bringing goods, paying high taxes. But the Chinese traders have come as investors, are then given tax breaks, and they do import trade. And guess what the president's response is? Stop trading, go into manufacturing. The guys are looking at him and asking him, when did you ever start manufacturing butter? You only have cows. So, so what do you know about manufacturing? So, so the question I put to you is, do they even have the ability to read this? Let's start there. And then, if so, do they have the capacity to craft the right responses and do the necessary local mobilization and policy initiatives? Or are they going to get caught flat footed?
No, no, Bob. Because you touch on the issue because often when we look at African governments, we focus on things like their corruption, their repression, but we don't
Mm,
actually study these things. You're saying their
mm,
ability to think through and make policy. And
mm,
I think that the majority of them won't. I'll give you
mm,
an example. I was watching a short documentary on why
mm,
China has really, it's now probably has a technological edge over the US or is about to
mm,
win the race. And
mm.
the guys were saying that you should look at an example of the way because one of the things China, for example, saw is that we have so many clever people, but
Yes.
they are all quick. They want to make the next Facebook, the next WeChat. So they're all building these apps
Yeah.
for the next clever Uber app and all of this. And if you think of it, Bob, these apps are really not big.
The
You
era,
on
the era of apps is gone.
no, no, and even that, they're not. You will have a Facebook, you will have an Instagram, but you're not going to have 100 of them. You'll have one. So then China decided that for us to win this technological age, this is
Yeah.
Xi Jinping because Xi Jinping is a very ruthless fellow, very, very
And
smart.
and extremely intelligent.
Yes. So he
Yeah.
said we must drive these young people away from
Hmm.
from these pursuits. So they
Hmm.
really became very nasty, and that's how they started squeezing the Albabas and all of this and all of this. So they actually made it very difficult for creative. So then everyone now went to more serious things like AI and things like that. But to actually think that a government could think like that and see that we need to drive skills away from these silly apps and go and do something which is more. And then one of the things that they did, and there is this has been written about. They also decided that they can't be uh, uh, ruled by lawyers like America. So, long back they decided, let us have engineers running, China. And so, you have all this writing about what happens in a country which is run by engineers as opposed to those which are run by lawyers. But the ones that are run by lawyers, in 10 years, you'll have 1,000 pieces of legislation to make things impossible. The one run by
Well,
engineers, you have, after 10 years, 1,000 bridges and railways and
things that
whatever it is.
1,000 things that make life possible.
Yes, yes. So
But mm,
to
but
actually, do you see actually an African government doing that, saying no, let us, let us stop these lawyers, these political scientists, and all of that. They dominate government. Let us bring in more economists, more architects, more engineers into positions of leadership and even cabinet.
so which Charles takes us to another issue that clearly expresses where these so-called African leaders or establishment or politicians stand on the question of technology. It is these unexplained crackdowns on creatives that are taking advantage of TikTok to make a bit of money with making a fool of themselves on the screens, and they're cracking down on them hard. So it's a Stone Age mentality that instead of nurturing these creatives and guiding them and saying, okay, it's not enough for you to know how to manipulate other people's technologies. What do we learn from these technologies and how can we adapt them to our own wishes? But what you see is the age old approach of
Yeah,
repression. And in my own opinion, really, Charles, I see that with that approach, you cannot advance any kind of invention because
yeah,
I was reading a book and someone was saying for there to be growth, for any of us to ever enter the Gilded Age, we've got to allow some rogues to thrive. Uh, for the music industry to grow, you have to have an Eli Wamala, but you must also have an alien skin. It can't just be only sanitized, nice people singing church hymns. No, you've got to have guys swearing in the nightclub. I mean, that's how the music and people tinkering with the sound systems and coming up with a piano and Afrobeat and all of these things. We've
yeah,
lost out on the technology. All we and for me, the most disappointing thing about that has been if you track Charles the migration of African tech talent from the continent to go and base in the Western world or in other parts of the world. It's just incredible how many people we've lost. But then, Charles, I didn't know this. A good friend of mine who is an engineer, and we're together in a different project, nothing to do with engineering at all, told me that in Kenya and in Uganda, Charles, this is a real statistic,
mhm.
52% of all trained engineers are unemployed.
What?
Yes, they are unemployed, not disguised unemployment. They have no jobs. Why? So I asked him why, why. So he explained. He said, unlike the global north, or if you look at the America, Europe, and the Eastern Asia, we don't have the kind of economy in this part of the world that can gainfully employ engineers trained at that level. So, for instance, you need a manufacturing sector that is very vibrant, that requires engineering work to employ these people, fabricators, builders, but you also need projects that are being executed by the state that require engineers, and you're not giving them to foreign companies. So that combination of factors means that. So the other day, I was looking at your guys at the monitor, and they had this cartoon which was drawn after a statement this week. This week there was a border expo in Kololo, and the president was the head of.
So what does the border expo look like? What does it do?
I think what it was a very clever guy who probably needed to make some money, organized an event where he brought suppliers. So there's two big players in the border industry. So there's Spyro, and I think they're all Indians, whatever, Bajaj, whatever it is. So these guys,
But Judge, there is something I hear.
to show their borders. Yeah, yeah. Then the same event was then used to mobilize border guys because the president was coming as a guest of honor. So it was both a campaign stunt for them to pay allegiance to him, but also I think the clever guy who organized it knew he was going to make a lot of money from the border suppliers. But what was interesting is somebody proudly stood at Kololo and said, borders are now the second largest employers after agriculture. Charles, imagine such a statement. And those two sectors happen to be the ones where the government of Uganda has zero investment in them thriving. In fact, the only reason both of them still employ lots of people is because they have nowhere else to go to get jobs.
Yeah.
So if that's the nature of your economy, but yet you're importing motorcycles, you're importing batteries, you're importing fuel. So what is left is for low-level technicians to service these motorcycles, put oil, repair this, do that. So engineers, at the level at which we're training them from different parts, have no work.
Goodness.
And Charles, which then, of course, goes to the one area which you asked me, and I was like, can't explain to you, where you said, why is it that sport is generating? But first tell me why you came to that conclusion, and what is it that you saw in sport that drove you to the point where you were able to say, oh my, how come there's so much emotion? How come there's so much unity? What did you see?
Well, it is just watching the World Championships in Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
There have been some very dramatic changes. One is the nature of the competition, and we can talk about this later. We are seeing, you take for example the way in which Simbu, the Tanzanian, won the men's marathon. Bob, this is, you run for 2 hours 20 minutes, 42 kilometers, and you win a marathon at the line at a deep, like it were 200 or 100 meter race. 0.05 seconds. So you runners, and then we saw the same,
those
same thing.
Stats are only in sprints.
yes, no, and then you saw when this battle between Jeff Cheruiyot and Asefa in the way, the Ethiopian Asefa in the women's marathon. It was Bob, 30 minutes, 30 meters to the end, they are running shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
Sprinting like nobody. So just like about a meter or two to the end, Jeff Cheruiyot kind of edges ahead. And she puts 2 seconds on Asefa. So that's and with we saw the same thing in the steeplechase. That's one.
Yeah.
But the second thing, and to me even more striking, is that the emotions, the emotion around these games between teammates, and even you know so you take, I think, the what the the race that Nani won, the 1,500 meter that
Jabo,
Kip Kipyogon won.
yeah. Faith.
Yes, Faith Kipyogon, and so at the end of this thing, these women from different countries are even falling on top of each other. And it's so emotional, and in the stands, you saw, Chebet, who had won her own race, crying tears because, I mean, Faith Kipyogon won this for the fourth time. So it isn't as if it's her first. But, Chebet is a close friend, so she was crying tears.
Yeah.
We saw this in the Hammer, and those Hammer people are very huge.
Yeah.
They, the Canadian American. And I have a theory. I think, Bob, we are in a very difficult moment globally. The
Mm,
politics is very nasty.
yes.
The toxicity that we are getting from America, and these things that people like Elon Musk are coming on and broadcasting the most grim
Basically,
and divisive,
hateful stuff.
racist. Yeah, very hate. You have what's happening in Gaza. You have the war in Ukraine dragging. You have the medieval war in Sudan. And all these skinheads and fascists marching in Western Europe. I just think that the world is really desperate for moments of joy, and I think Tokyo happened just at the perfect time. But you, Bob, you are a runner, huh? What what is happening? This.
I'm going to
Why? Oh,
explain it to you. You ask.
yeah,
You ask the question.
yeah.
No, you ask the question.
These the other trends that we can talk about. But I want to understand these margins. What is happening? It's because
No, so Charles, that I can explain immediately. So I think what has happened, why you're getting those margins, is that sport is one of the few places left where merit still plays a role in recognizing effort. There's a direct correlation between effort, outcome, and merit.
mm, mm,
So
mm,
what has happened is, and I've just finished reading a book by a chap called Alex Hutchinson called Endure, and he's trying to analyze. He's got a PhD in physics, he has a master's in journalism, and then he has a degree in sports science. So this guy, what he's explaining is how over the years science has invested in optimizing performance, human performance, whether
mm,
it is cycling, whether you're talking about Tadej Pogacar or whatever. So it's been years of figuring out, is it the brain, is it the muscles, is it what, how does glycogen work and all of that stuff. So Charles, what has happened, I keep telling you this, that the only democratic space left where there is free participation and where you are welcome to be a part and accepted for what you do and try, so that every time you optimize you'll be accepted, is sport. So
mm,
if you look, for instance, if you look at Formula One, they are always optimizing by small things to get the edge. You no longer have those huge margins. I mean, even the time of the dominant athlete, the Muhammad Ali, the Tiger Woods, the Mike Tyson, Kipchoge, I think is over, because
mm,
even Hamilton, because what you're going to have is, as more people are allowed in, the contestation becomes based on talent, based on how you train, based on how you are managed. So the variables become very important. It is you're not there because your dad is head of CAF or head of FIFA. No, you're
or even
not
if
going
you
to get a gold.
even if you try,
Very
like you remember
unlikely.
the Ethiopian,
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
one of the officials put his relative, a young girl, in in
They
I
will
think
not.
in the Olympics. Was it? No,
Yeah.
I think it was in Tokyo. And
Tokyo Olympics.
by the time she crossed the lines, the medals had already been given.
Even the
It's an
anthems had been
embarrassment.
played. People were going to the airport.
But
Charles.
you touched on something else, Bob, which I want you
Yeah.
to
Mm.
to speak to.
Yeah.
So sport is one of the last great meritocracies, and in terms
Yeah.
of allowing access, it's very democratic. But
Yeah.
then from that democratic angle, right, the issue of representation, what do they represent? Do you see that, where we have thugs running governments and things like that, that perhaps sportsmen are kind of pure form?
Yeah.
Is this why we adore the
Okay.
footballers? Is this
Let
why?
me let no. Let me even just completely throw a spanner into your issue. Take the emotion that was around Chan footballing, especially in East Africa. Why why did the tournament drive so much emotion where the league doesn't? I'll tell you why. For once, you had a footballing contest in which you don't have these thugs trying to manipulate the outcome, the footballing mafia. But Charles, the most compelling thing was that the footballers who are achieving on the pitch have tended to be people from a very modest background. They are not my children, your children, who are very privileged and can go and play golf and excel at it, or can go uh, to swim and be great swimmers. No, these are guys who were probably had raw talent, were kicking around a ball in their village, and then slowly they made their way. Now they are on the national stage. So there is a way in which those people in the mass sports, whether it's running, whether it's football or netball, and even now basketball, where on the African continent, and then Rwanda is now bringing in a new element of cycling. There is even so it is an element in those sports, Charles, where the participants represent the, for want of a better phrase, the wretched of the earth.
Yeah.
And they represent the fact that you can actually lift yourself to glory uh, by sheer effort and hard work. So a lot of young people, if I may put it that way, or those who may not be in very privileged circumstances, they see themselves, they see their own type achieving and excelling, and then they start to themselves believe that this is doable. But Charles, it doesn't stop there. Even for those who are privileged and have been given everything on the silver plate, they still see the glory in the kind of achievement that these guys are capable of. So even they can't afford, even they want that emotion to rub off on them, So you have all of these very privileged kids of very big people in Kampala going to Chan because they must be seen to be part of an effort that's meritorious. Even so my point, Charles, there is quite simple that and still the politicians haven't found a way of controlling the outcome. They may control the input, but they can't control the outcome. The only person who ever managed that was Idi Amin. So when he went into when he went into the boxing match and he had a technical knockout. But the other thing, Charles, I wanted to remind you, and sort of making the point about what we're discussing is to say, I want to take you back to the country we both have a great attachment to and love, and that's South Africa. And you will recall that up until 1995, two sports were at the center of the divisions in the country: football and rugby. But Mandela managed to dismantle the barriers of access. And then in the 1995 rugby match, you have this fat South African uh, Xhosa or Zulu guy who you were used to seeing at an Orlando Pirates game, hugging an Afrikaner guy, and they're both in a Springbok shirt, and they're excited. And they've, to the point where the captain today of the Bockies is a Xhosa boy from the Eastern Cape. So that, and then you had how in the glory time of South African football, so the point, Charles, is that and in Uganda it was slightly different. In Uganda you had the sports which were democratic at the time was boxing and football, and those were our glory years, Charles. Before these thieves started to get involved in trying to keep the kids out of their earnings. So the only sport, Charles, left today that I see in Uganda, it's actually about 3 or 4. One is running, partly because there's a growing community of recreational runners, and then you've got foreigners who've come in and taken on the professionals, but also the folks at UAF are not as thuggish. So even if they want to, they can't manage. They don't have the skills. So it's been allowed to grow. The other one is basketball. Then the other one is netball. And you can see that there in those sports where there's no locking people out, there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of growth, but it opens up to very many participants. And so it creates opportunities. So I think that that element is what has gotten us the sport where it is, but also because of the toxicity you spoke about. The toxicity, I mean, Charles, let's just make a comparison. Compare what was happening, the scenes at the NRM Delegates Conference, which is supposed to be an all-inclusive mass party that allows in everybody. And yet here were fights over who can come in and who cannot come in. Now compare that with Nambole, where the only thing between you and going into the football game was your money. You paid, you got in, you enjoyed, you left. Which one is likely to engender more unity? It's the sport.
No brainer.
Just let's do our good or bad event of the week, and we let me start.
Yeah.
I kept wondering because I couldn't explain why Salva Kiir took the position he did with the help of Uganda to arrest Riek Machar. It just didn't make political sense at all, every which way you look at it, until yesterday. Do you know what he has done?
With his son-in-law.
Yeah, just appointed his son. The man was fixing a succession around his daughter. So then he gives the son-in-law. The son-in-law is a very young guy who was trained, I think, in Uganda. He went to school in Uganda, trained, I think, in Uganda. He's got all the technical skills of being a soldier. What I'm not sure of is whether he has the political skills, whether he understands, and whether, again, back to the thing we were discussing last week, such aristocratic or monarchical moves can work. But I think for me, I don't even know whether to honor it with the word depressing. I think I just can't understand why perfectly capable, competent, clever people come up with the most ridiculous solutions to the question of political succession. Why they think that what they're plotting to do will work. But the rest of us can see them constructing a very painful end. But, well, c'est la vie, as the French say. So I'll stick to running. And so if I ever have to actually do a physical long distance run from here to Mbale to escape the consequences of those kinds of solutions, I am fit enough to do. Yeah, over to you, Charles.
Bob, last week, you remember we discussed Ethiopia and the inauguration of the Riots Dam.
Yes.
There is a video, we'll get our guys to put it up on Facebook, I think. I saw it on Facebook, that was posted by the Ethiopians on the celebrations and the marking of the thing. And I don't think I've ever seen a video like that anywhere out of Africa. It's just
Really?
incredible. Yeah, it's just it's simply mind blowing. I'll send you a link. But the other
Please
one
do.
is on it. It goes to the issue you just touched, our politics. About a year ago, there is an island called Anobon Island in Equatorial Guinea. The residents protested at a Moroccan company which was I think mining and exploding things, and the explosions were breaking down their houses and schools. So a group of the leaders there got together and wrote to the government and said, there's a problem here. Can this be done differently? And all this. So the government, as it turned out, President Obiang Nguema allegedly had a stake in the Moroccan company. So what does he do?
Yeah, of course.
They arrest all of the people who signed the petition, and then they shut down the internet. They shut down the internet, and they even shut down the ambulance service on the island. So they basically,
wow.
So it's been almost a year since, and how can a government shut down? It's like going to Sese or something and shutting it down because the president is not happy.
But Charles, I don't know why you're surprised. The whole point of the Nguema administration has been to be not a government. Anyway, it's been great talking. Thank you very
Wonderful,
much.
Bob. All right.
Yeah. We'll see you next week. Yep.
See.
All right. Cheers.
Lovely. Have a good week. Bye.